So I did a video earlier today, a really long video about all the reasons that I do not believe that organizations should be investing in training around microaggressions, eradicating them from the workplace. There are a couple of reasons for that. I think that the research behind microaggressions is shoddy at best. And that's just a reflection of the fact that it hasn't really been well researched. It hasn't had the time to really go into it. Maybe it will be a lot better like 5-10 years from now. Who the heck knows? Right now, not there. The other reason, though, is that there are a lot of other problems that are much more toxic to organizations that most organizations are actively ignoring as we speak. I lay it all out in the other video. I get a little heated about it. But listen, I wanted to do this second video because regardless of what I think of microaggressions, and I think there are very valid things, some microaggressions are very valid things, you know, the reality is that it's made its way into our zeitgeist. People know the term. Maybe not older employees, but man, I'm telling you, your young professionals, they know what this term is, and they've been trained to look for it because they've just come out of college campuses where this stuff has been talked about an awful lot in the last 5 or 6 years. And so they're coming in, they're ready to go, they know what microaggressions are, they know how to spot them and call them out and hold people accountable for those microaggressions. Thank you, higher education. Thank you. You aren't teaching them to write or to communicate or to have confidence in themselves or how to find a job or how to act when they're in the workplace. You aren't teaching them any of these highly practical skills, but man, you got the microaggressions down. Thank you. All right, I'm being a bit facetious there, but not really. I really do wish colleges would do a better job at preparing people for what the real world looks like. But listen, I wanted to be productive about this conversation as well because people do know what this term is, and I want to talk about what to do if you feel like you've been microaggressed against at work. Now, because I like to have something to react to, I've got this article from CNBC, 4 workplace microaggressions that can kill your confidence and what to do about it. I'm going to react to this article, add my own thoughts and commentary. Spoiler alert, I disagree with some of the things in this article. I agree with some things too. But the reason I think this is important is I want you to get different perspectives. Maybe you watch this video and you're like, Carlin, you're full of it. Like this article's the best thing since sliced bread. Fine, you know what? Whatever. Who am I to judge? If it works for you, then fine. Maybe you'll take some from what I have to say. Maybe you use a combination of the two. Really important, especially with stuff like this that's newer terminology. There are very few experts, in what this is. So it's important to consider these different perspectives when you're considering topics like this especially. Let's dig into it. Many factors can contribute to an employee's unhappiness at work, including bad management or grueling hours. But what about the smaller, tougher to identify events that can contribute significantly to an employee's disengagement? I'm going to stop right there. Your happiness at work depends, very literally, on you making the choice to be happy. We know this from lots of research. Right? Here's the thing. Most people think they make the mistake of thinking that their emotions are a result of their experience. Something happens to them, they feel a certain way about it. Problem is, it's just not true. What we know from, again, mountains of research, I should do a whole other video on this, is that what you experience is a result of the emotions that you have. And you are always in control of your emotions. You are always in control of your emotions. And I'm going to prove it to you. We're going to do a little exercise right now. I want you to kind of sit back in your chair, wherever you are, close your eyes, and I want you to think about a time when you were really proud about something you accomplished at work. You just felt really good. You were really satisfied with your outcome. Maybe you got a pat on the back from the boss. You got a call out in the staff meeting to say, really good job. We couldn't have done it without you. You were really proud of what you accomplished. You worked hard. You had a big win of some sort. How did you feel in that moment? Did you feel happy? Did you feel accomplished? Did you feel strong? Did you feel proud? Did you feel overjoyed? Did you feel excited? Whatever emotion you were having in that moment, allow yourself to sink into it. Allow yourself to experience that emotion again. Now open your eyes. How do you feel? I'm going to bet you, because I've done this once or twice, you're feeling pretty good. You just told your brain to experience an emotion. It wasn't based on something that happened to you. It was based on something that you did. Your happiness at work depends on you making the choice to be happy. But more on that in a different video for a different day. Let's keep going, shall we? These small acts are often referred to as microaggressions. Columbia University professor Daryl Wing Su tells CNBC Make It that microaggressions are the everyday slights, indignities, put-downs, and insults that minorities experience in their day-to-day interactions with well-intentioned individuals who are unaware that they have engaged in an offensive act or made an offensive statement. I want to make a point about Daryl Wing Su. This guy is like, microaggressions are his jam. This is how he's made his name, is in researching microaggressions. I talk about him a lot and some problems with his research in the other video. That's not to say there's not value in it too. I do actually think he has some good ideas, but this is his jam. He has a vested interest in this. Let's just keep that in mind. These acts are normally related to a person's race, gender, sexual orientation, or disability status, and while these incidents are often subtle, their impact can have huge effects on your performance and your confidence. Below are 4 common workplace examples of microaggressions, some of which you may have encountered without even realizing it, and what to do in response. Number 1, you speak excellent English. As an Asian American author, speaker, and professor, Su says that it's not uncommon for students and colleagues to remark on how well he speaks English. While the comment is often intended to be a compliment, its underlying meaning can carry great offense. What they're saying is that you are a perpetual alien in your own country. You are not a true American, and that is often communicated to Latinos and Asian Americans. To the person saying it, they are not mean and evil people. They just don't realize that what they are saying comes from an implicit worldview of what an American looks like. While a remark like this might go ignored in many professional settings, Su says the proper way to address it is to kindly acknowledge the compliment while also correcting the person's bias. My response now is, thank you. I hope so. I was born here, he says. The thank you catches and complements the conscious thought that I'm complimenting you. The I was born here underlies the unconscious misconception that I'm a foreigner in my own country. This may surprise you. I love that response. I really do. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Now, this guy's had some time to develop this, and so, kudos to him. I think it's a great response. What I love about it is, first of all, the main thing I love about it is that even though this is something that if you were born here, I absolutely understand why someone would perceive this as offensive. But what I love about his response is it shows that he has developed the perspective to know that the person saying it didn't mean anything offensive by it. But he's still letting them know that he heard it. I think this is a brilliant way to approach it. I think that it's important to thank people when you get a compliment. I also think that in this case, how he says, I was born here, it lets people know, not cool, not cool. So I think that's really great. Now, perception with the stuff like this is key, though. How you perceive the situation, the inner dialogue that you have about the situation, and frankly, acknowledging that sometimes your perception might not be the only way to look at things. The biggest thing that I'm honestly worried about when it comes to microaggressions are the fact that, frankly, it can mean literally anything. This is the things in this article specifically are very, very overt, things that I absolutely understand people would find offense over. But I touched on this in the other video, but I think it's worth repeating here. Part of the reason I'm talking about this today is the Buttigieg for President campaign sent this survey out to their staff, asking them if they experience the following microaggressions from it's for their staff that are people of color from a white colleague. The examples they included are being talked over, being left off an email chain, not invited to a meeting directly related to your job, having an idea ignored or dismissed, someone else taking a credit for an idea. Now, none of those things are pleasant things. We don't want those things to happen in the work environment. But every single person that has ever worked in any sort of office environment has had one or several of these things happen to them. And this is my primary issue with microaggressions, is it's literally based on the receiver perceiving that they have been microaggressed against, when It may not have been anything to do with your race or your gender or your ability or anything else. It may have just been that someone forgot to CC you on an email. And this is where I think perception becomes really, really important. And the first thing you need to do is, like, no matter what anyone else says or does, develop that confidence in yourself. I know I just said that like it's like an easy snap of the finger thing. It's not. But develop enough confidence in yourself to not let other people get to you in this way over silly, silly things. Don't allow this. And again, I understand on this one specifically, and many of the ones we're going to talk about, why you would be offended. I totally get it. But it doesn't mean that it's healthy for you to be offended. And frankly, why are you giving people that power over you? Why would you give them that power to dictate how you feel? I want to look at another example of this too, because when I first read this, I initially thought of my husband. Now, my husband's an immigrant. He is from Ukraine. Russian is his first language. The minute that he opens his mouth, you know he speaks Russian. He has a very, very thick Russian accent. It's something he is so self-conscious about his English. And so even though he's been studying it since he was a little kid, like 6 years old, but he is very self-conscious about his English. And so if someone said to him, "You speak excellent English," my husband would be like, "Woo!" He would love it. He would take so much pride in it. And I'm deadly serious. Like, I've even had to reassure my husband, like, your English is great. You speak better English than most native English speakers. So if he got a compliment like this, he would be like in hog heaven. And this is why perception matters. You have like the same phrase. This is why microaggressions are problematic in organizations, because the same phrase or the same act, it's not going to impact everyone the same. And really, if you're being microaggressed against, or you perceive, rather, that you're being microaggressed against, really kind of take a step back, have some perspective. Did this person really mean to insult me? Is this something I really need to worry about? And why would I give a off-the-cuff remark any power to make me feel bad, make me feel less than? You have to do that for yourself. No one's going to do it for you. All right, number 2. What she's trying to say is, if you are a woman or a racial minority, chances are you have been interrupted or talked over by a colleague in a meeting, a circumstance often referred to as mansplaining. According to Merriam-Webster's, mansplaining is defined as the moment when a man talks condescendingly to someone, especially a woman, about something he has incomplete knowledge of, with the mistaken assumption that he knows more about it than the person he's talking to. California Western School of Law professor Leslie Culver says she's seen this occur several times in a professional setting. To address it, she suggests gathering a group of other female colleagues who will support you in calling out the microaggressor. I already think this is a horrible idea. Well, not horrible, but perhaps ill-considered idea. I'm going to tell you why in a sec. Have a conversation before bringing it up. Something like, "Hey, Hannah, I want to address Bob speaking over me. Can you help me to open the door to that discussion?" Culver says. This way, the next time a meeting occurs and Bob interrupts you, Culver says your allied female colleagues could interject. Yes, what Leslie was trying to say is really important. And then if Bob speaks over that colleague, another female ally will jump in and say, "Yes, I agree. What Leslie is trying to say is really important." Culver adds, that way you are all working together to continue to point that guy out. Another way to combat the issue is to seek out male allies as well. According to Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg, men can be a part of the solution too by speaking against their male colleagues and saying, "That's a great idea. You know, Liz, that was your idea. Tell us about it." Listen, the problem I have with this is that when you feel like you've been microaggressed against, why are you bringing other people into it to solve your problem for you? Honest to God, I'm not in favor of allies and having support systems in the office. I think that's really important. But why aren't you fighting your battles yourself? Why are you bringing other people in to fight those battles for you? By the way, they're blatantly stealing this was a tactic that was actually widely publicized about being used in the Obama administration. And so that's where this is coming from. But I do want to give you an example. So I do believe mansplaining is a real thing. By the way, I've absolutely been mansplained to. Doesn't happen that often to me because, frankly, listen, let me be blunt. It doesn't happen that often to me because I don't suffer that nonsense. I don't put up with it. In fact, last year at the SHRM annual conference, the Society for Human Resources Management annual conference, I had literally just gotten off the stage. Huge stage, great crowd. I did talk about my book, Zen Your Work, got a great reception. And right after that, one of them occurred in person and two of them occurred on Twitter. I had like 3 guys in a row mansplain to me. And it always comes in threes, doesn't it? First guy I didn't really worry too much about because I didn't have time for his nonsense. But the 2 Twitter guys I engaged with, one guy, I called them both out. I was like, don't mansplain to me. I literally wrote the book on the thing. I literally just gave a talk at the conference you're at about the book on the thing. Come on, man. Now, one of them was like, I'm not mansplaining. I'm simply citing research that I know of and blah, 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 blah. He did not take that well at all. The other guy, though, he was a little miffed at first. But then we had a conversation about it, and then guess what happened? He went to the conference bookstore and bought my book, read my book, posted a glowing review for me on Amazon. I was so grateful for that. And I ended up having a good conversation with him. So I guess the moral of the story here is don't suffer mansplaining. Call it out yourself. And you have to be careful about, again, is this a battle I care about fighting right now? Is this something that's worth my energy? Or is it something that, okay, yeah, John, all right, whatever. Because the thing is, too, and this is something people don't talk about when it comes to mansplaining. If it's happening to you, it's probably happening to other people. And most commonly, it also has to do with different work styles and conflicting work styles and kind of going like this. So it's not just a gender thing. It's framed as a gender thing, but it's not just a gender thing. Usually it's a work style conflict where you're literally going like this. You're not speaking the same language. And so I do think it's important to call it out. Let people know you're not gonna put up with that. Stand up for yourself. Be your own woman, for Christ's sake. That's what I think about that one. All right, let's keep moving. Is that your natural hair? Studies show that many women of color, especially Black women, experience bias in the workplace related to the style and texture of their hair. As an African-American professor, Culver says she's experienced that bias firsthand. Absolutely, I've seen this happen. Absolutely. At a conference earlier this year, she was asked by a white colleague whether or not her braids were her natural hair. Why would you do that? White people, why would you do that? Don't do that. Come on, man. At the time, I didn't even know what to say. We are in this intellectual space, and she put me in a position to have to defend my hairstyle. And then she asked, am I presenting? It's like, that's how she should have started the conversation. She's absolutely right. I 100% agree with her. In a situation such as this, Culver says it's always best to weigh the pros and cons of addressing the person directly. If the microaggressor is someone in a position of power, then you may want to think about the impact they can have on your career before you hold a one-on-one conversation with them. If this is the case, then she says you will want to find a leader who can be your ally to kindly correct the person on your behalf. Listen. Well, let's finish what she has to say, and then I'll say what I think. You need to get an informed, intelligent, well-meaning leader who isn't afraid to say, let me speak up against this. Or if the microaggressor is a peer who has no control over their job, then Culver says you can pull them aside and kindly explain to them how their comment was offensive. That way, she says, they don't have to ask the next Black woman about her twists or hair braids. Okay, overall, I actually agree with a lot of this advice, but where I don't agree with, again, is why are you bringing other people into it? Why aren't you fighting your battles for yourself? And actually, what worries me about this type of suggestion is not necessarily what she specifically recommended. It's what I know is going to happen with this. It's some eager young professional is going to read this, and they're going to say, I'm going to go report this person to HR. That's the leader I'm going to get. No, it's a horrible idea, man. It is a horrible idea. First off, you have to step back. And like I said earlier, have some perspective about this. Is this a battle you want to die in? Is this a hill you want to die on? Is this something that's even worth it? Why are you giving people this power over you? And again, I agree that it blows my mind that someone would ask this question. It wouldn't even occur to me. It's crazy town, but Obviously, it happens. Obviously, there are women that have to deal with this. And if it does, I would kind of say, and again, it's hard for me on this one because I'm not in their shoes. I'm obviously not in their shoes. But I kind of go back to the mansplaining thing because that has happened to me. And the first thing I think about is like, do I want to give this person this power over me? Do I want to give this person the power to upset me? Is this something that really makes a difference in the grand scheme of things? Is this something I want to put any energy into at all? What are the better uses of my time and attention in this scenario? So I kind of run down the list of like, is this even worth fighting? But if it is, don't go running to HR looking for backup. You are going to get a reputation. I promise you. And I know this is not fair. What I'm about to say is not fair. You are going to get a reputation if you go running to HR for stuff like this. You're going to get a reputation. And then if you really ever need their help, they're not going to be there to help you. Because they probably are going to brush stuff like this off, to be quite frank. I think the best way to address it is by doing it yourself, saying, really? Or do something lovely. Come up with a lovely phrase like the guy did in our first example. Thank you. I hope so. I was born here. Come up with something where you can just kind of like brush it off. Let them know that it was not appreciated in a really lovely way and let it go and move on. Do not let this ruin your day. Okay, last one. I think I'll sit over here. Although this is rarely said out loud, both Culver and Sue explain how this unconscious thought often translates into action when it comes to where people sit in a meeting or classroom. My African American students tell me that on the first day when they sit in their seats, the seats next to them are often the last to be taken, or when they come in late and sit next to a white student, they notice less communication. She adds, if you confront someone, they will say it was just a random act, but therein lies the difficulty because the experiences of racism are lived by people of color and white Americans don't usually see what's going on. As the professor and author of the book, Microaggressions in Everyday Life, Race, Gender, and Sexual Orientation, see, I told you, dude, microaggressions are this guy's jam. Sue uses his research to educate businesses and corporations about intervention trainings they can do to prevent these issues from occurring. It's exactly what my issue is in the last video is about, because this is not the best use of resources. I'm telling you, this is not the best use of resources. And again, not to say that this stuff doesn't happen, but you're going to make a federal case about where people sit in a meeting room? Why aren't we dedicating those resources to team collaboration, team building, team cohesion, getting people to trust one another, building psychological safety? Much better use of those resources. A lot of people see these individual acts as harmless, trivial, or insignificant, but what we have found is that when employees in this type of environment, their productivity declines and they have a harder time learning. He's not studying the full extent of the reasons why workplace productivity suffer. If this stuff is coming up, here's what else is happening on the team. Psychological safety is probably not as strong as it could be. Psychological safety is a key driver of any team's performance. This has been proven over and over and over and over again. Probably the team has issues with communication. Probably the team has work style conflict that they don't understand and haven't worked through yet. Probably this team has issues with engaging in productive conflict with one another, particularly when they're going to other people to try to address their problems for them. So there are 4 problems that I just listed off the top of my head that are probably more relevant to this team's productivity and to their engagement than the fact that someone didn't sit next to someone in a meeting room. Are you kidding me? He adds that some employees he has worked with talk about racial battle fatigue, which he says is the constant battle of thinking, what I think really happen? Was an intentional or unintentional slight? If I confront the person, what are the consequences? Again, I have to ask, why are you making the choice to dedicate this additional energy to this person didn't sit beside me in the meeting room? What if instead you took that energy and said, you know what? F it. I'm going to be the most amazing member of this team I can possibly be. No matter what, they are not going to be able to deny me. I think it's a much better way to do it. And I'm not questioning the fact that, listen, I absolutely believe that there are some circumstances where this might be happening for exactly the reason they think it's happening. But I also think it doesn't do you any good as a human being, as a professional, to make the base assumption that this is based on your race or any other identifiable attribute, and to be able to say, and to focus your energy and attention on why this person didn't sit next to me. I just don't think it's a good use of your energy, and it's going to get in the way of you being able to contribute in the organization at your highest level. The thing that is damaging about microaggressions is that if you don't know how to respond to them or feel like you can't, then you feel disempowered, said Sue. But when you have the right strategies, you can feel empowered. I absolutely agree with that. And you know what? It seems as though his strategy here is to give people the strategies where they can feel empowered. I absolutely believe that's the answer. I do not believe the answer lies in these trainings or interventions to teach people all the things that they shouldn't say to their colleagues. I just don't think those trainings are really, really productive. But I do think there is a lot to be said about giving people tools where they can feel empowered, they can have responses to these things. Absolutely. I'm 2 thumbs up for that one. Whether you experience these microaggressions on a regular basis or a more isolated basis, dealing with them is a pain. And if you're a minority, Sue says you'll likely be told the issue isn't that big of a deal. Many employees of color tell me that then when they raise the microaggression issue, their well-intentioned coworker tells them, "You're being too sensitive," or "Why are you making a big deal about that?" Then they begin to second-guess themselves. That's why Sue says it's important for workers to not only seek allies outside of their racial group, but also allies within their racial group who will help validate their experience. When the support group, the thing about this, actually, let me finish reading and then I'll give you my thoughts. When the support group comes from other people of color, they can validate the fact that you aren't crazy and what you are experiencing is legitimate. To ensure that you're always protected, Sue suggests keeping documentation of each incident just in case it becomes a pattern or escalated to a personal threat that becomes a legal issue. I don't disagree with that at all. Culver adds that you should also do some personal research on implicit bias and gender and racial stereotyping in order to better identify these harmful acts. Implicit bias stuff has been repeatedly debunked. P.S. People need to get better educated on what that looks like so they can become more empowered and understood. There's an implicit bias test that was created out of Harvard, and there's actually a whole bunch of different implicit bias tests. You can Google implicit bias test Harvard, it'll come right up. You'll be able to take the test. Even the creators of the test have said this is not the most accurate thing in the world. They've acknowledged that it's not really, they've acknowledged that maybe it's not the most reliable thing to focus on. What I was thinking when we came to this support group thing is, in my research on workplace bullying, and I wrote my doctoral dissertation about workplace bullying, one of the things I found was that social support in the organization when you are a target of workplace bullying, it helps in the short term. But in the long term, it actually becomes counterproductive because people just get into this pattern where they're just venting to each other all the time, and it keeps them in that really negative place. I think the biggest thing for me, if you think you've been microaggressed against, is really how you handle it is your responsibility. That includes everything from how you perceive to what you do about it. And at the end of the day, the biggest question for me is, why are you allowing people who probably don't have any negative intent to make you feel bad? Why are you allowing this? Why are you giving your power away to them? I think one of the most intelligent things that Sue says in this article is that it's about finding the right strategies for you to feel empowered, regardless of what anyone says, regardless of what anyone does. That's going to be key to this. So find those strategies. Hey, listen, I read a lot about them in my book. I'm probably not even speaking to my mic. So I do write a lot about those strategies in my book. Granted, and I do want to be upfront about this, my book doesn't deal with stuff relating to race or even gender or any of those things. It's not what it's about, but it is a lot about personal empowerment. So it might be a good place to start. Hey, I bet, look up his book, see if that might be a good resource for you. Again, I do think he has some good suggestions here. I'm being a little bit of a negative Nelly when it comes to this sort of thing, because I just don't think on a broad scale the research is there to back this up yet. Again, it could be someday, but it's not there yet. So I would really prefer that organizations invest resources in combating workplace bullying, really like overtly toxic behaviors that we know how to measure, that we know how to document. But what I like here at the end is he says, keep it, like, document each incident, just write it down. If it becomes a pattern or if it gets worse, then escalate it. I think that's a good approach and something that's a really smart thing to do. All right, so those are my thoughts on this particular article. If you have comments about how you would handle microaggressions or any other questions, leave a comment and we'll see what you think.